Again, I really want to thank you all for showing up. I'm going to make this worth your while, I hope. Mainly because what we want to do for this particular class is try to approach climate anxiety, this idea of helplessness, and then see its connection to agency dimensions, and then why is it relevant, or how is my person going to be affected by climate change, or maybe it already is. So with that being said, let me begin by telling you the story that we are in, okay? This is just a reminder of how we are doing. But before that, I'd like to ask you, so imagine that we could measure our anxiety in relationship to climate action, of how the planet is doing in general, everything we hear on the news, everything we know that is happening right now. If you could, maybe put your little dot, like imagining it, where are you, where would you be located right now using this particular point system, let's say that zero, it's, you don't feel any climate anxiety whatsoever, and you feel very confident that we will solve the climate crisis. Maybe a little bit yellowish, number 5, I'm still not fully convinced that we will resolve this crisis. Or what about point 10? Like maybe you feel that there's really no hope. Okay, so Sophia says, I think we're in 7, 8. What about the rest of you, Lawrence and Pedro? How are you feeling?
5, 6. I think we definitely have the potential to solve it, but on the other hand, there are so many people that don't even believe in climate change or that just don't care. So it would be important to bring all people on the same side.
Yeah, that's an important element. We're gonna be, I hope I give you a little bit of hope on that matter, because whenever we wanna look into climate action, we feel more hope when we see more people acting. So that's a fact. But there's an interesting data on that matter. Hey, Ana Lucia, thank you so much for joining. We're just beginning our class, so um, get ready with me, because now, I just wanted to have like a sort of a reading or of how are you feeling, and how does it impact in you, knowing that according to very important people such as the United Nations chief,
Climate change is here, it
says
is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable, and the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable.
so. Imagine one of those people who have access to a lot of really privileged information making those type of statements. I think it really says something, right? Not only that, but you know, the kind of world that we have created in a way is also something that we need to analyze, because as we saw on our first class, there are some correlations, maybe not necessarily causational elements, but there is something about the way that we have created this notion of happiness, of the ideal country, that is really unsustainable. And the question is whether by detaching such elements, is it going to affect the way that we understand happiness to be? And that's an important question that I hope that you take for today. Because class, here's the deal. We already heard the UN chief says that we're moving out of, you know, climate change and global warming into an age of global boiling, right? That's a rhetorical, those are rhetorical elements just to point out that, we're not doing enough. Everything seems to be getting worse, right? But when we look at the science, according to some geologists such as Paul Crutzen, and this is the key thing about this line that I want you to have. imagine, although what I'm going to say it's going to be unfair because we're not incorporating climate justice, but imagine that if we sum every physical force that we have put into this planet, if we add all of that physical force, never in the history of our planet, let me just rephrase it this way. Never in our history of our planet have we had such an amount of power that we are affecting our planet's climate conditions. That is something never before seen. The planet has done it by itself. Totally, that's a fact that we can't change. But we have never had such power. And that is why today we're talking about the Anthropocene, because it's not about, something that is natural, but something that comes from us humans, from a particular type of activity that is pushing us out of the Holocene into the Anthropocene. And it's not like, this didn't happen out of nowhere. Of course, we could talk about the Industrial Revolution, but we also need to talk about those exponential growths that we can see in these particular trends that when put together, they're usually understood as the Great Acceleration, and they usually come hand in hand with the Anthropocene, because we kind of seem to have like a particular socio-political, socio-cultural, whatever you want to name it, and global event that happened after 1950 that just made every kind of trend go up. But yeah, Lawrence, go ahead.
Transportation is good for the climate, right? Because you can travel with public transport easier, and more people on a smaller room is just more efficient, energy-wise.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of elements in there that are gonna be, how are you gonna say, more efficient in some places. But if we look at a little bit globally, of course, this is not always the case. So for instance, here in Mexico, we don't really have that much efficient systems. And that's another important thing, because we have the solutions, but maybe those that should be, or those that push that exponential curve there even more, maybe they don't have it incorporated as much. And that's a fantastic insight, Lawrence, because that's something that we will hear a lot. Solutions, we have them. Actions are the things that we don't, or at least where we need them. And the thing about these particular graphs, and just as Lawrence, you were pointing out, we were developing also, more efficient transportation systems and whatnot. But something happened around 1950 that made this big exponential growth in such trends that should make us wonder, because at the end of the day, this is the problem that the Great Acceleration led us to. This is the situation that we need to tackle. This is the global greenhouse gas emissions by sector and again, I'm just saying again, but these are the global elements, right? So as you can see, energy, it's almost 3/4 of the problem. Then we have agriculture, then we have industry, and then lastly, we have waste, right? And of course, we could, it's such a good thing that we have it narrowed even in subcategories, because that's how we want to tackle all of these problems. But what I'm saying is that imagine that this wasn't a problem before, and these trends, although some of those, of course, might be good, for instance, transportation, telecommunications, even tourism, right? They still add up to a problem that we need to tackle. And what I want to say, and what I want to add as a layer of information, is that, the problem has been getting from this up to this, but throughout what happened in between is that, because you must be wondering, well, what have the governments done, right? What have, institutions, organizations such as the United Nations done so far? And before I get into the graph, Lawrence, go ahead.
What do you think of the decision of the newest COP where they said they want to stop using fossil fuels, but they don't make themselves accountable for it? So they just said they want to do it. Do you think that makes a difference?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you right. Maybe it's my internet on the first part, but you were talking about how during the last COP there was this narrative of that they want to leave fossil fuels, but they don't want to feel responsible of the actions. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, the end result is the
Yeah.
world leader, the guy who talked at the end, he said they want to get out of fossil fuels, but he's also an oil sheikh and he didn't really want to take responsibility, or the governments in general. So do you think this that they're saying that they want to quit it, that has some weight? Do you think
It-
something will change?
That's another really fascinating question for Lawrence, because hours before the COP event, the COP president was assigning litigation for petroleum extraction, if I'm not mistaken. And not only that, but during the whole COP, he was still doing it. So what I want to say is that, and that's the same message as this graph. We are so good we're so good at having all of these great intentions, gathering together at climate conferences, creating scientific groups such as the IPCC, then having all of these protocols such as the Kyoto Protocol and the Montreal Protocol, which were legally binding, which just basically means that there were legal and economical repercussions for any of those who didn't fulfill their part. But as you can see in this graph, as we have emitted even more CO2 emissions and global temperature keeps on rising, we have also been very good at the blah, blah, blah. And climate action actually seems like it's not there, right? And that's why I think that the example that Lawrence, you were just saying, it's a really important one, because we want to pay close attention to what they say, but also what they do, right? Pedro, go ahead.
That
Yeah,
just sorry.
hi, sorry. Yeah, just like trying to say it's kind of funny how like they trying to implement things. As an example, the other day I saw like a reel on Instagram that said that Taylor Swift. Well, we all know the troubles that Taylor Swift has had with his private jet plane, and it said something like, "Okay, yes, but she bought like the CO2 permissions to use the
The plane.
jet,
Yeah.
the plane, and she was like sharing on their social media that okay, yes, I consume a lot of my jet, but I purchased these like bonus. I don't know what's the word.
Like a sort of a credit, like
Yeah. Credits of miles from the CO2. But the thing is that they still have money, and while it maybe is like some kind of help, and it isn't something directly as the damage that they're like creating by using this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another example that shows the complexity of the solutions, right? Because maybe Taylor Swift, from her inner, let's say that she really had that true intention of, being conscious about her emissions, and then uh, paying close attention to the expert in her team who told her, this is what you should do, right? And maybe she actually fall into that trap, right? But then again, this is why it's important that not only we, and this is to me like the thing that is really troublesome, that we have created this world that has a lot of solutions, but a lot of them are false, right? And that's one of the elements that are going to be like even really fundamental for one of your evidences, in which you will have to analyze a sort of marketing ad, a product that allegedly is sustainable, and you need to dig in a little bit to see whether or not you see it viable, you see if it's really sustainable, basically. And in the case of such characters, and then I'll pass the microphone to you, Lawrence. I think it's gonna be also really interesting to see the kind of world that we create, because it's not like, musicians such as her are gonna have to change maybe her whole logistics when it comes to her work, right? Going to Japan and blah, 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 blah. Or maybe she will have to, that's still a question that needs to be addressed. Does she really need to have that much, those much dates? Or is there any way that she could lower her CO2 emissions by maybe not flying that, constant? Because I think the whole dilemma with Taylor Swift was that a lot of her flights were really personal, right? And it was like, well, why am I gonna have to end up doing X if we know that Taylor Swift is gonna pollute even more than I'm gonna do in my whole life, even if I do things right? And in a way, that's an important and a critical question. But more on that. Lawrence.
I just wanted to say that it often feels like they just, like, if you can say, the big governments of the world just tell us what we want to hear, but then the practices are like shady. Also connecting to Taylor Swift with the CO2 certificates,
Uh-huh.
I think they can be a good thing, but if you plant a tree in Africa and it's cut down 5 years later, you say you got the emissions back, but in reality the emissions just are still there because it's not monitored.
Exactly. And that's what I mean that we need to look at critically at solutions, because the environment is not like as simple as that. It's not as I know that I'm aware of the kind of impact. I'm just gonna go and plant a tree, because we don't know the signs of a tree, just to put it in a way, right? When does it start absorbing CO2? What kind of trees should I be planting in here? And a lot of different questions that are going to be relevant, just as, for instance, with EVs. So here in Mexico, we're getting EVs that are more affordable right now. So recently, I think that the lowest one is the BYD, the Dolphin Mini, which is gonna be what, 350,000 pesos, something of that sort. And it's getting accessible. That's what I want to say. But it's really just about getting, changing your fossil fuel car to a battery-based car. Is that gonna change everything? What kind of impacts are we getting for extracting even more lithium? And not only extracting, but also, mining. That means explosions, and that means changing an environment that's creating an impact, right? Which is going to create different types of impacts as well. So there's a whole complexity of a world that we have created and that we haven't really looked at it, face to face. And this is another thing that I want to say. Sometimes people, think that, everything that's happening is because the governments are not doing anything. There's inaction. And I want to say that it's actually the opposite, just as XR Cambridge is tweeting in here, right? Because this is an example of something that the government of the world does. They give subsidies to fossil fuels. Now, look at this graph by the International Monetary Fund. As you can see, subsidies although not exponentially, but they keep on getting higher and higher. And it's not, of course, it's not as simple as just saying let's stop fossil fuel subsidize. There are contextual elements that make all of these things happen. And we're gonna look at one later on, by the way. However, what I want to say is that this is the kind of action that the government keeps doing that take us to ecological breakdown. We know the solutions. We need to stop fossil fuel subsidies. Maybe not, like stopping them one day to the other. Maybe there would be different ways that could be better, maybe with less economical impact, whatever. But what I want to say is that this is one of the reasons why no country at all, at least to Climate Action Tracker, is aligned with the 1.5 degrees Celsius Paris Agreement compatible. Like there's no country who's doing enough. And I want to remind you, we haven't even reached 1.5, and we're already seeing a lot of impacts that, for instance, Acapulco recently, that we wouldn't want to have, right? So what's going to happen when we reach 1.5? That's another question. And connecting, this and this is the reason. These are some of the actions that are taking us to this particular scenario. This is the real world based on current actions, not inactions again, class. So what I want to say is that pay real close attention to what the world does. It's not that they're not doing enough. On the contrary, they're doing enough to take us to this scenario. And that's why we need to be paying close attention, because it's not only, policies and actions, it's also the cultural elements that have been created that in a way make us get there, big companies creating, divisions on the one hand, and on the other hand, creating consumers that maybe don't understand the whole complexity of the dilemma. Sometimes companies also creating solutions and without, as if they didn't really know what's the real problem in their production. And check this out, even having companies, the world's largest oil companies, having these world records in profit because of an invasion. Is this really the kind of world that we want to live in? Because according to scientists such as Johan Rockström, out of all of these different, problems that we need to tackle over here, the easiest one is actually just stopping fossil fuels. And I don't know about you, but this image kind of it would seem like it seems like this statement doesn't hold by itself. It seems like, is it really? It makes you wonder. And not only that, but they say that it's even much tougher to transition the way that we eat, or our food system, our economy, our behaviors, our choices, our cultural parts, and even more so to get justice and equity in place. So, with all of these elements, what I want to trigger in you is remembering that this is the problem that we are in. I want to remind you that governments are not doing enough. It's not that they're not acting, they're acting, but they are not doing enough to avoid the scenario that we shouldn't be expecting. We should at least be here. And this is not even a good scenario, right? Now, what do I want to do with all of this data? I want you to keep on tracking on yourself. How does all of this information make you feel? Does it in a way makes the problem more transparent, because you already know where do we need to act? You also know which actors, governments, are not doing enough? Or does it make you feel, on the contrary, that there's really not any kind of hope for us? Now, I'm triggering these emotions because in this particular week, you all are gonna be feeling rather than thinking. And that's why the activity that you have set for Friday, for tomorrow, it's about expressing climate change, and its solution should be rational. But for a reason, for some reason, it seems that the whole, planet, or, the humans who are in charge of this, it seems like it's not reasonable for them at all. So it's important that we express these emotions in a safe environment. And I wanted to share with you a couple of activities that I've found to be really interesting, and that they have a message that is aligned to the class, and that I wanted to share with you. So for instance, in here we have two activities from previous, some of these are from previous semesters. So in here we have an image in the background, but also a poem on the front that it says, nature, there's a secret code in nature. You can stay as long as your plants are in ones of harmony. And everything that implies is heavy. Don't cover the flowers from the sun. Don't disturb the birds, and don't pull off leaves, no matter how dry they were. Now I'm nature, and this is my code. Don't cast a shadow over my world. Don't disturb my peace. Just let my roots grow. Please don't touch my scars, no matter how healed they might seem. And to me, it's really interesting, how each of you is gonna express how are you feeling. Are you feeling hopelessness, such as this thermometer? Are you feeling, on the contrary, hope? Are you somewhere in between, maybe like this poem? Or what about this other one? I think the image speaks by itself, but let me read you the context. So Lises in here wrote that what triggers his anxiety is knowing that there will be a point where water will be limited, and it is possible that anarchy and disorder strike due to the lack of water, and we live in apocalyptic times where people kill each other for water. Now, let me tell you, this was a nightmare that he had. But this is something that has happened already here in Mexico, in Sinaloa, but also, as far as I know, in Africa as well. I can't remember the region, to be honest, but it has also happened. Go ahead, Lawrence.
I think you're thinking about the great Ethiopian Renaissance dam, right? Where Ethiopia is about to cut off Egypt's and Sudan's water. That could lead to a war in the future.
Well, I mean, exactly. But hey, let's keep on moving, because I think I'm getting a little bit behind, and I don't want to take your whole afternoon, but that's a great point as well. Water is going to be an important, and particular here in Mexico, and Lawrence, I'm pretty sure that you're here, or I think that's where you are. So this is going to be maybe even something that you're going to be feeling and living, the crisis that, this lack of access to research that is associated even with our human dignity. Well, it's going to be impacted in a way. Now, let me share you also this, this student created a Minecraft such a scenario where everything is burning, and he says, and it says, after I watched the video, I started to feel the same emotions that people describe in it. I remember that I had feel the same since many years ago. It hurts that every time that I watch a video for a new of some natural disaster like floods or droughts around the world, I get to feel useless or powerless for not being able to take action that has a real impact to create a solution. Again, I want to emphasize that I get to feel useless or powerless for not being able of taking action. Now, check this last metaphor. Like the villager who is resting in his bed, waiting for the fire to reach him, while the others houses of his neighbors, their pets and their harvests are burning down. So such a negative scenario, right? But what about this one? I want to have hope. Under the weight of changing skies, climate anxiety takes its rise. In our power, a future lies, where hope can win against anxious skies. We're staying together hand in hand for a safer, greener, and more peaceful land. So again, it's gonna be about the type of emotions that you can express related to the different degrees of your climate anxiety. And I wanted to poke them a little bit because I also wanna let you know something that happens whenever we feel this kind of anxiety. And it's related to a reading that a couple of months I got to a friend of mine shared with me, and I've and it gave me such a, I don't know, I had a, and I think that the insight that they're sharing, that they're just great. Let me just skip a little bit, and it says it's actually just a perpetuation of colonialism. This is a social researcher, by the way. By individualizing distress, and this is by perceiving our climate anxiety or individual, we miss what is politically happening around the world to various communities. So this is saying, that whenever we feel climate anxiety, it is also as if a veil, something that covers our sight, doesn't allow us to see that there are multitude of people who not only feel climate anxiety or distress, but that they are being mobilized or that they need to escape where they are living because the conditions caused by climate actions aren't, or they don't make life possible at all, right? So maybe we're a little bit privileged in the sense of not living the full beast of climate change, but that doesn't, or that shouldn't dismiss the way that you feel, because at the end of the day, I think that if we want to begin by somewhere, it's by recognizing how we feel, but then moving into different points. And this is the first element that I want to share with you. The first out of three. So the first one, and related to a comment that I think Lawrence, you were saying earlier, we don't need everyone to agree. And this is a research by Penn Today that I found really interesting, in where they were saying that the kind of social change that we need to tackle climate change, it's not as big as we think. Maybe just by having 25% of people, mobilizing in one way or another could be enough. So rather than thinking that everyone should be agreeing at least, maybe that's something that's just really, impossible, or that we shouldn't be considering. But actually, that we need to have more hope. The other thing is, look around you here in our class. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are gonna be producing hope sort of expressions that share this feeling that you have a concern, that each of you wants real climate action, and that this climate anxiety that makes us feel as an ego who is isolated from the rest of you, is not alone at all. We are all together, and there's a lot of people, there's a lot of climate activists that have gone through these different points. And what makes us different, and I'm not saying that you all should be climate activists, but what I'm saying is that if we want to find how to tackle climate, how to move into the right direction, we need to find also what makes our belly or stomach feel like fire, like something is, burning. And we need to be also careful, of course, with that fire, because we don't want it to consume us, but to use that energy into moving into real climate action. Because a lot of the different activists, that's what they do. And those are the types of videos that I'm sharing here. But because of time, I'm not going to be playing it, but I'll share them with you, of course. And, now moving from the climate anxiety thing to this kind of a reflection on what should we do, I would like for you to understand that the ethical part of our class has to do with analysis on morality. And usually when you're in a philosophical class where you're studying ethics, you immediately get to this point of what's the difference between ethics and morality and whatnot, right? But in here, I want you to think of it. Morality is the way in which we are living right now, or to use another image, this is our current morality. And this is what we need to move away from. That is why we need to critically analyze the way that we in this planet are thinking about the climate problem. And from this moment onward, it is time that we critique the morals surrounding climate change. It is not that we expect of you to become a climate activist again, but to look in them, but to look into also the different kinds of people that have created solutions and see how that fire that ignited in their belly moved them in the right direction. So this is the question that I would like for you to take after our class. What ignites your belly? Because this is what makes anyone who is part of climate action feel empowered. This is where that energy comes from. It is not something out of the ordinary. It is something that we all feel, but they just put it in the right place because they have realized this class, that their actions matter, however small. And because they have shared this message of hope and others have connected with it, making them realize that their actions matter and empowering themselves again. And as you can see, this is like a circle that just keeps on growing and growing and makes, all of these big names such as Greta Thunberg, although, maybe we can critique a lot of her, of course. But what I want to say, class, is the following, that we as human beings have this capability to influence the way that we function and the way that we act, but not only ours, but also of the others surrounding me. And this is a fact even from psychology, from a psychologist named Albert Bandura. And we are using that notion in our class to express that each of you has at least these 4 ways or paths where you could move into the right direction with that fire in your belly, to change the way that you see yourself as a person, as a citizen, as a consumer, and as a future professional. Because on the personal dimension, what we want to understand is that this has to do with what makes each of you different. What is that defining element or the defining elements in plural? We might have different beliefs, different dreams, different desires, different personalities as well, of course. But all of these different elements, some of them are not sustainable whatsoever. According to current research, climate change is being ignited mainly by rich people. And also, if we have this dream of keep on traveling and traveling without being critical about the way, that we use our transportation systems, well, I mean, I'm sorry to bum you down, but also even small actions such as, there's this trend of collecting different kinds of Funkos and, having walls full of them. Or what about even to listening music? Even streaming music through Spotify has its own share of emissions. So all of these different elements that makes us who we are, and then the different beliefs are the ones that we need to understand that are going to be impacted, that are being impacted by climate change and its different crises. Yes, go ahead, Lawrence. Yes?
What's the Funko or Funko?
Oh, the thing with Funkos is that they're made from a particular type of plastic, PVCs, which
And
is
what,
really poisonous and harmful for the environment as well.
okay, but what is a Funko?
Oh, Funkos are, let me just Google it for you. You've probably seen some of these.
These things, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, like kind of just toys to be displayed.
Okay, thanks.
Right? And I say this because, You know, I've seen trends and I know people that their whole personality is based on being a collector of these type of elements. But there are also beliefs that affect the way that we act in climate change. And this is not to say for that on the case of the first example that every religious person by nature is against real climate action. No, I've known people on both sides. But this one, oh my God, this came from a really close family member. If God wants climate change to happen, then there must be a reason, right? Why should I even act if this is, the way things are supposed to be? Or what about, well, karma exists, so polluters will pay for it. Or even, the argument out of freedom, which is a valid one, we should feel free to choose what is best for us. But what if that best for us is actually not really the best for us? Maybe we're not really, or the way that we understand best, happiness, the good is not what we should be, or it's not including all of the different impacts that should be expected as well. Well, I believe everyone is entitled to their own opinions, right? Now, as you can see, this is just two examples, but of course we can expand on different elements related to desires, personality. But to me, and I think this is where a lot of the climate change denier come into play, is that climate change by itself is asking us to bring about systemic transformations that we have never seen. On our first class, that's one of the key scientific takes that I share with you, according to the IPCC, right? So those who are really attached to all of these different elements, they are gonna feel attacked. They're gonna feel defied. They're gonna feel that they shouldn't act. And they're gonna make arguments that are just, that don't even make sense sometimes, but because they don't want to accept an important fact, that this is the place where we need to start questioning who's going to be the new me under climate change. And this is not to say that you should all have solar panels in your house, that you should all have EVs and whatnot, but that we need to change, that we understand how we live, at least, right? So that maybe, as Lawrence, you were saying, maybe there's not a lot of people surrounding me that does, but when you start doing it, maybe more people gradually will, keep on implementing small actions that are gonna get us close to whatever we want to get. Now, there's another key important thing about the personal dimension, because we have talked about its definition, some examples of the different type of elements that interconnect with climate change. But there is another way through which culturally we have attacked this personal dimension to make us feel or to stop us from real climate action. So for instance, if you hear, your actions don't count, come on. How are you going to compete against Coca-Cola, right? And although that could be practically right, that doesn't mean that your actions, because as a consumer, maybe if you're still consuming them, maybe that's not going to be enough, that's not going to be enough by itself. However, if you understand yourself as a citizen, if you start surrounding yourself as a community and start seeing all the different impacts and then start pressuring the government and, you keep on making it, what I want to say is that it is not, whenever you feel that someone is making you feel small, look at the other ways that you can act, because every time they're attacking you, they're mainly attacking the personal element, how you feel about your degree of impact on the crisis. But they also attack you even on personal elements. So I don't know if any of you, wants to have a family, but for instance, I remember, when my wife and I were expecting Nicolas, this is something that we even heard, right? And I was like, it's not overpopulation the problem, that is a fallacy, but the fact or how we're gonna make Nico be a consumer to a big degree or not, and that the different types of consumerism that exists out there. But as you can see, there are different types of ways of attacking this personal dimension. The third one, for instance, made by Donald Trump, by the way, whenever he added or directed such action invention to a specific culture, this is what it is known as ecofascism, because it's putting the blame on a specific culture so that we feel some kind of fire towards that specific community, right? And this is something that we also need to be careful of. So, there's a couple of elements in here. And what I want to add last to this element is that not only is all of these different personal elements of beliefs, dreams, desires, personality that makes you special, but also elements that are cultural, such as heritage, gender, race, habits, I don't know, all of these different elements that surround us and that we share. We might not always agree upon, but that we share in a way, and that makes us different, that makes this whole global diversity possible. However, then we need to ask ourselves, is there really like a methodical way that we could, maybe get out of class and feel that we could move on? And I would suggest that you think maybe of solution on the personal dimension on this matter. First, reminding you, the personal dimension is really mental, unlike the citizen one. This is going to be the personal, it's about the inner aspects of myself. So I need to recognize whether my belief system or my culture surrounding me is in accordance to the science of climate change. This requires a little bit of getting to know the basics of climate change, and that is why on this class, we begin by doing it. So when you start detecting where maybe it's not really that in accordance with, maybe start having an inner dialogue. Recognize what needs to be changed, what elements of your personal dimension need to be changed, so that then you begin planning towards such a transformation in your life. And I want to end today's class sharing with you two elements. This is an activity that a classmate of yours turned in a couple of days ago. And it's a collage that I found to be really interesting, because in a way, it's both showing, at least to me, what's made this whole crisis possible, but at the same time, I've kind of see the solution in there. In the middle of the image, we see all of these big mouths, open, right? And it is gonna be through speech as well, I think, that real climate action, or that the actions that we need, are gonna be positioned. So I wanna leave you with two messages. One is mine, and another one is gonna be from one of your classmates. Today, I hope that you realize that your voice matters most. Each of your voices matters. Who you are matters. But if we want everyone to recognize that in us, we must do something about it with the resources that we have available. No matter how small, no matter how big, every action counts.
Hello, my name is Sofia Romo, and here is my poem. In a world of trees so tall, I feel small, and that's not all. Every move I have been in nature's dance, I feel it cold. Choices make life spark. Each breath adds to Earth's yard. Lost in a maze of harm roots fun, desperate, I'm not the only one. But in this storm, I glimmer bright. If we unite, we can make it right. Heal the wounds in the plants, seek for a future we can all breathe.
So, class.
Hello, my name is...
I wanted to... Then never mind. That's all I had for today's lesson. As I was saying you earlier on our WhatsApp group, this class, maybe unlike the rest of them, are more personal, because I do believe that if we really want to tackle climate change, we need to recognize in ourselves first whether we feel a struggle recognizing, accepting all of these changes that these whole problems require of us. Because and I remember having a student telling me, teacher, it's not fair. Why am I supposed to make all of these big efforts when previous generations, they haven't done really as much? And that's a really valid question. And that's the kind of world that you are going to be living in, that you're already living in. And although I can't, say for certain whether, my generation has already done everything it can, at least I'm convinced that I'm not, that we haven't. And that's the reason why I try to teach this class at least maybe differently. Rather than seeing all of these different, all of the differences, we need to find a way to combine our actions. So for this particular week, you have two homeworks, and one of them is related to creating some expressions such as the ones that I've shared with you today. Some artistical expressions, and however you feel comfortable. The thing is, you need to express your true inner feelings. That's all I care for on this activity. You being honest. It doesn't matter if you make a drawing, you take a picture out of it. I'm fine with it. But I want to see the real you, the you that is struggling to recognize, or maybe not, the whole mess that we're in and the kind of actions that are expected out of you to make this planet livable. And the other activity, which in a way is connected to what I was saying, to the different generations, has to do with watching a movie. Now, talking about being fair and whatnot, I do strongly recommend watching the movie Strange World. I think it's a good movie in its message, and showing us how three different generations approach one problem differently. But it also shows that there's only one thing we need if we want to have combined action, and that is the bond that we feel with each other. So if you can watch the movie, go ahead. If you can't, there's different ways maybe to access the movie, or you can look in, I don't know, in YouTube and watch videos of people reacting, or looking out for summaries of the movie and try to understand or respond to the questions that are being asked to you. The idea at the end of the day is to guide you into thinking that this problem that connects to the personal dimension is in a way twofold. I said that the personal dimension is about the inner aspect of it, right? But the cultural element, although it's also part of our psyche, of our psychology, it's also surrounding us. So it's in both places at the same time. And I hope that with this movie, you get to see those two parts, how, those different generational aspects are part of us, and that makes us have this veil, not really understanding the problem, but also how they physically, create a struggle to really look for solutions. So with that being said, I don't know if any one of you has any questions, any comment, or anything at all. Sofia, Karina, Lawrence, Ana Lucia.
Hello, teacher. Yes, I have a question. You put my video, and I was wondering if that was good. That was the poem that I wanted to share. I haven't done the activity of the movie yet, but I want to know if that poem is good, or do you want me to do like
It's
another activity?
no,
Yes?
Sofia, that's beautiful. Honestly,
Okay.
it's beautiful, and I really appreciate, the fact that you created it, and also, I'm sorry if it made you feel uncomfortable, but if you allow me to share with the rest of your classmates,
Yes.
because I think that in it there's one of the key elements from this class. There's hope, and we need to find it.
Okay. Yes, teacher. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Sophia. What about the rest of your class, Karina, Lorenzana? Any questions, any comments?
The second activity, a team activity or solo?
I couldn't understand you properly, Lawrence, but we
The
have,
sec-
are they the
is the
same?
sorry? Is the second activity a team activity or solo?
We have
So-
to, yes, I'm sorry. I just got even a Zoom message of my connection. Let me show you. So in Canvas, we have on week 3 these 2 activities. And the activity about the personal expression is this one, my personal dimension amidst a slowly dying planet. This one is due for Friday, and this discussion is due for Sunday. And an important fact about every discussion that you get to see later on is that you need to create 3 replies. That is an important thing. So first you need to, watch some of these elements and then respond to these questions. After you post them, clicking here in reply and then posting here your comments, you're gonna see the different comments start popping up from your classmates, right? And you need to reply to 2 more. And I'm saying this because this is something that happens constantly. Because, or what I want to say is that the rubric in here, we are giving points in accordance to whether you realize the personal post, that is 60 points by itself. Then if you just do one response, we're gonna add 20 points. And the second response is gonna add the rest of the 20 points that are needed. Should we discuss it in a team? Do you mean which activity? This one, the Strange World activity?
Yes, the second one. Before answering the questions.
Oh, okay. No, this is actually, although it says like, well,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, it's more individual. I mean, if you wanna, of course, talk with it with your teammate, that's also great. I wouldn't stop you from doing that. But it's not a requirement out of or for this particular activity.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, Lawrence, about the whole confusion. All right. So with that being said, thank you so much for staying, Karina, Lawrence, Sofia, and Ana Lucia. I again hope that rather than leaving you with the climate anxiety thermometer and the hopelessness side, that maybe I got to ignite a small fire in you so that, like I was saying, it's not that I'm expecting each of you to become an activist or something of that sort, but that you find in you how are you going to do something different? Because we need people to recognize that and start moving in a different direction. But more on that on our different ethical dimension classes that we would have. So have a good day and have a great weekend, class. Take
You
care.
too.
Thank you, you too. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks, teachers. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Take care.